wean-to-finish livability. Really appreciate her being here and sharing her thoughts with what her experiences in those systems. So with that, we'll turn things over to you, Christine.
Great, thanks, Joel. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here and share our experiences. So a couple disclaimers. One, we won't be talking about PRRS today. So this will be what we've done to improve livability sans PRRS. And the second would be all of this is going to be our field data and trials that we've done in a real system. So it's not pristine, randomized controlled trials done in a university setting. So it is a little bit messy, but we'll share what we have and what's worked for us. So for those that haven't heard of Pillen Family Farms, we're a family-owned company based out of Columbus, Nebraska. Most of our farms would be based in Nebraska, a few in South Dakota, and we do some finishing in Iowa as well. But we'll cover our system a little bit and then talk through our improvement strategy. So what did we do as a company to approach livability and kind of the different steps we've taken? I'll talk through each of our livability targets. So we focused on diet, sanitation, stressors, how we use technology to improve livability, environment, and then some pig management techniques. And lastly, we'll hit on the take-homes that we took away from our experiences. So again, Pillen, we've got about 75,000 sows. All those sows would be based out of Nebraska, and we do finish out most of those pigs, so roughly around 2 million pigs marketed per year. We are a little bit of a unique system. So Nebraska, if we can get a site permitted, we go big. So most of our farms are anywhere from 12,000 pigs. Some would be 30 to 50,000 pigs on site. So it is a little bit of a different dynamic. To accomplish that, we've got some things to overcome. So we do have to commingle to run an all-in, all-out system. We'll commingle anywhere from 4 to 8 sources per nursery. We'll then commingle those nurseries in the finisher. So even in the absence of PRRS, we were dealing with a lot of little issues that all the joys of commingling bring and the joys of large sites bring. So a lot of that will be from that perspective. So I want to touch on our improvement strategy. Started about 5-6 years ago. We were just really not happy with our livability in nursery finishing in PRRS negative pigs. It's so frustrating. These are negative pigs. We should be getting really good performance. Instead, we were seeing anywhere from 8 to 12 wean-to-finish mortality on negative pigs. So really decided we need to scale back, get back to the basics, and kind of dig through the root causes of what was going on. So we removed everything. We took all of our meds out, kind of just stripped it all down and said, all right, we're going to build it back up. So it took a lot of discipline, but we slowly added in different things to try and measure what our interventions did. It also took a lot of discipline to do one change at a time. As you can expect, you pull all your meds out, you pull everything out, and where you're unhappy with 8 to 12% mortality, now you're looking at 12 to 16% mortality. So it did take some patience on our end to do that. And then lastly, keep a record. We had a member of our team who was very disciplined, tracked every single closeout and every intervention, which allowed us to go back and analyze this later. So just digging into the interventions, I'll start with the feed management. I am not a nutritionist, so there's just the one slide. If you got questions on it, feel free to ask our nutritionists. So we pulled all of the meds out, we pulled the complexities out of the diet, and we realized that just wasn't working. So the first intervention we did was to put plasma or a plasma-like product back in our diet, and that dramatically improved our nursery livability. So it was about a 2% mortality difference just putting the plasma back in. At that time, we also put in some antimicrobials. So we had some Mecadox. We then scaled that back to Adenogard CTC, and now today able to go naked in all of our nursery and finishing diets. Sanitation was the next big step that we looked at. We're all in, all out, multiple flows coming in, and a 4-day turnaround on these nurseries. Realized maybe we weren't getting them as clean as we thought. We thought, we've got hot power wash, we're synergizing, but it just wasn't getting the job done. These are brand new nurseries built within the last 5 years, plastic floors, state of the art, and still seeing poor performance. So we implemented a new sanitation protocol, dug into, hey, what can we do differently? And adding a detergent step was something that we had not done previously. So looked at different types of detergents. We settled on an alkaline detergent. It has a great degreaser property, which helped break up the biofilms. So where we were struggling with rotavirus and scour early, once we implemented this detergent step in our sanitation program, audited it, verified, had people do this routinely, we saw some really good results. So our sanitation protocol is to remove organic material, apply our detergent. We use a foaming tip at a 1:64 ratio, let it sit for 20, 30 minutes, come in with a hot power wash, inspect, disinfect. We're using Synergize. I'm sure any disinfectant would work. And then having dry and downtime. And dry and downtime might be 12 hours, 24 hours. So we do bake the rooms. So here's our field data on we used a BioClean or a BioSolve detergent. We had 340 barns total on trial and over 420,000 pigs where we examined BioClean versus no BioClean. 164 barns with it, or without it, 176 with it, and it's about a 3 cents per pig investment. But we saw a dramatic, dramatic decrease in mortality. So where we were at 4.4% mortality without the detergent, we dropped down to a 3.23% mortality with the detergent. So over 1% decrease in mortality, and all we did was up our sanitation game. And the biggest difference there is the rotavirus disappeared. So where we were starting pigs that first 7 to 10 days, we're dealing with rota A, B, C. It was like a light switch overnight, no more rotavirus. And still to this day, not dealing with any rotavirus in our nurseries. So the next big thing we did was look at, are there stressors that are impacting our pigs in the nursery? And we noticed with our existing vaccination program at that time, we'd go in and do our mid-nursery shot, and the pigs were they'd be depressed. They would go off feed. Sometimes we'd have an E. coli break or a parasuis break following the vaccination. So we wanted to look at what can we do differently. So we were on a traditional program at weaning and then 3 weeks placed. This is our Circo, myco, ileitis combination vaccine. And decided we're going to push that earlier. Let's get all of our vaccinations done while pigs are on the sow, while they're still comfortable with mom. They're not stressed. So we did processing vaccination. We're already picking pigs up at this time. And then a vaccination 24 hours prior to weaning. Again, we were already picking pigs up. So not only did we do all this before they were stressed with that weaning event, but we also reduced one injection. So we're not having to go back in mid-nursery and give this second shot. So we, again, real world is kind of a before and after, but we had 328 barns on trial, 187 of them with the late vaccination, 141 with the early vaccination. And I'll focus on the livability today, but we also looked at feed intake, feed conversion, and average daily gain. So all of this is up here, but I really do want to highlight the mortality. We were at 3.24% doing our traditional 3 and 6. And by switching to the early pig, the only change we made was the early pig vaccination, we dropped to 2.51%. So that was 0.75% decrease in mortality just by switching that. Now we did do a lot of work on maternal antibodies ahead of time just to make sure that this was an okay program for us. But we've been doing this now since 2017, no Circo breakthroughs, no ileitis breakthroughs in finishing. And value added along with the feed conversion benefits that we saw was about 55 cents a pig. So this one, when we're lucky and we don't have PRRS, we're able to implement this. But we were also giving a PRRS vaccine on arrival in the nursery. So within the first 7 days, saw the exact same thing. Pigs were stressed when we went in and did a mass vac. So I don't think this has anything to do with the fact that we had PRRS vaccine going into our pigs. I think it was solely just that stressor event. But same thing, so we were at 2.61% mortality when we were giving a vaccine on arrival, and dropped that down to 2.08% mortality just by not giving that vaccine. So along with the mortality savings and the saving the vaccine was about a 67 cents per pig savings we saw. So we'd gone through, we'd eliminated all of our medications. That included sow farms. So sow farms are naked, nurseries, finisher, and realized that we were having some Mycoplasma suis show up, some Agalactia show up, which then led to high variability in wean weights, which led to some issues with pigs starting on feed correctly. So we'd looked at how do we treat this Mycoplasma suis and stumbled upon Pulmotil. So we opted for Pulmotil AC. We administer it through the water continuously through lactation. And then this is actually a study we did in our test barn. So this was a randomized control trial that we did. And we looked at pigs that were weaned from sows treated with Pulmotil versus pigs that were weaned from sows with no Pulmotil. So everything else was the same. The piglets were not treated. It was just the sows that were treated with Pulmotil. So in addition to some sow benefits, shorter wean to estrus, fewer sow treats, we actually saw a nursery benefit by doing this. So the striking difference would be dead percentage, over a % difference in mortality just by running this at the sow farm. And then we're trying to be conscious about our antibiotic use and be responsible. So wanted to measure treatment. So you see we did also drop our treatments and med cost per pig in the nursery just by running this in lactation. There was a wean weight benefit too. So it's hard to tease out whether or not it was the drug or the wean weight, but there was definitely a benefit there. I'll jump through this pretty quickly, but we did utilize technology to help change some of our management practices. And a lot of this stuff is pretty simple, like I think we all know it, but being able to have cameras on pigs and kind of work through, okay, this is what we're doing, this is what happens to the pigs, help with the belief and the buy-in. So we installed cameras in all of our nurseries. Every single room has a camera so we can view pigs 24 hours a day. So these pictures just show where we mounted the cameras above the door. And then here's an example of what we would see on our camera. So we really realized, hey, maybe we're not ventilating these barns correctly. They're brand new nurseries, and you'd think everything would be fine, everything's set up correctly, but inlets were in different places, feed lines are in different places, water lines. So it wasn't perfect to start with. So we'd see this, we'd place pigs and we'd see piling. Where we place them and you think they look fine, you go home and then you see this, well, it's no wonder that we're having issues starting, maybe issues scouring. So we did use this to pick some of our interventions. So the vaccinations, that's how we kind of targeted in, maybe that's a stressor with these cameras. So we could also watch activity, and we noticed here, tracking humidity levels along with what the pigs looked like. They're wet, they're messy, they're uncomfortable. We needed to do something different. So this is just a different nursery style and kind of what we were observing. So the interventions that we made here, we're looking at our inlets. We could see that we were drafting pigs. It was high humidity, so the pigs were wet. Then we drafted them, so that chilled them even more. And then, we'd see heaters kick on. Heater kicks on, and that is cold air blasting on the pigs. Then they got chilled. So we had to make some different tweaks, and every barn's different, but just tweaks to all those different settings. So here's an example of how we mitigated some inlet issues. When we just placed pigs, we're running them at about a half, these are tight barns, so we're running at about a half CFM at placement. There's really nothing coming out the sides of the inlets, but there was a lot of air dropping down the middle of these bifold inlets. So we went through and bubble wrapped all of these. So you can see another example here, how we did that. And then had to caulk around the inlets too, because we were just getting too much air dropping on pigs. So talked about this already, but obstructions in the ceiling were causing different airflow patterns. So when we built more nurseries, tried to combat that. Lastly, the front pens were getting drafted more than the back pens. So we added some weather stripping along these doors and saw a dramatic increase in pig comfort. Last thing we noticed was on really windy days, the attic was getting so pressurized that we were getting air forced into these nurseries. So went and cut some holes in the side of our new barns. So we added some relief shutters, which then helped release the pressure in the attic and no longer ended up forcing air through those inlets, just to increase the pig comfort. Some other management practices we looked at were mat feeding. And again, everybody knows this, but just by getting pigs up, this study specifically, I think, was 6 times a day. We are not able to execute that. But just getting in there, mat feeding, we did end up with 1 pound heavier pig at day 14. Here's another study that we did looking at specifically mortality with mat feeding. This was done in a couple of our nursery barns, but 2.7% mortality with no mat feeding, 1.9% mortality with mat feeding. Wean age was another area that we looked at. So we have increased, we were about a 20-day wean age, then increased to around a 22, 23-day wean age. And this, I like this chart because it shows the percent weight loss by wean weight. So if we can get to that, above 22, the amount those pigs lose in their body weight post-weaning drops dramatically. So to hit on some stuff with finishing, this is pretty heavily nursery focused. We believe getting a pig started well in the nursery translates to a pretty easy finishing turn. But I do want to touch on ear necrosis. So we'd get an ear necrosis, a flu break in the nursery, 2-3 weeks later, fairly severe ear necrosis. Maybe 80–90% of the pigs affected, and it wouldn't just be a little bit, it would be a ton. And it's hard to look at, but then you get into finishing, and we were doing post-mortems, and huge abscesses in the joints with true Parella. So it felt like these ears are just sponges for true Parella, and it's leading to this systemic issue. So implemented our ear tipping protocol. So day 0 of birth, we go in and we clip just about a ½ inch off the tips of the ears. At birth, there's very little vasculature developed. There's hardly any bleeding. Pigs don't seem to notice it and have almost eliminated ear necrosis. Not that it's completely gone, but I should have pulled our coding for lameness in the finisher, but the true Parella stopped overnight with the ear clipping. The last thing we've really looked at was stocking density and how we're placing our nurseries to fill our finishers, and what can we do to improve mortality through those types of management changes. It was pretty eye-opening. So we looked at our stocking density over time, and we'd gotten tighter and tighter and tighter. I think that's natural. People want to, maximize space. But we saw a direct correlation with our stocking density and our mortality. So you can see some of these barns where we're stocked at, 6.6, 6.7, we're averaging 7% mortality. And then our 7.1 to 7.2, we're down in that 5% mortality range. So we decided to look at this and do a field study to examine these two different densities. So we looked at 6.7 square feet and 7.2 square feet. This is real world. These barns all had PERS, but felt like we got a very good trial, executed marketing because wanted to make sure that the culls were accounted for. So compared 6.7 to 7.2, and we saw differences in a lot of these different aspects, but the mortality is really where we get the value back out of reducing our density. So at 6.7 square feet, we're at an almost 10% mortality. 7.2 square feet at an 8.3% mortality. So over a % reduction just by dropping the stocking density. And for reference, these barns, they're 10 barn sites, so it's every other barn. So all the pigs were at the same site. It was just an every other barn thing, about 1,200 to 1,400 pigs per barn. I know this is a wean-to-finish talk, but I had to just mention this because this has made a big improvement for us with our late finishing mortality. When we first started this journey, we had quite a few mycoplasma positive sow farms, and we could make all these interventions, but then we'd get to marketing, we'd do first cuts, everything would get stressed, and we'd have pigs dying of pastoral multocida, other gram negatives. So made the decision to do mycoplasma eliminations, and it's all but eliminated these late finishing death loss issues. So with all of this, this is our exciting story, is we're able to reduce and be more judicious with our antibiotics. So in our PRRS negative flows, our goal for 2022 is to have 0.39 grams of antibiotic per pig marketed. Back in 2019, where we were still having to kind of cover with some feed medications, we were at 10.6. So our PRRS positive flows are obviously not hitting this, but where we're PRRS negative, that's our goal and that's our vision. So key takeaways for us were implement the systemic evaluation process, really focus on sanitation, reduce stressors, keep pigs warm, dry, draft-free, and just meeting the pigs' needs. All right, thank you.
All right, we'll have time for a couple questions as we transition to the next speaker.
So we did not. Just to be fair, our pre-wean mortality was higher, so we're probably in that 12 to 16%, but we did not see any change in pre-weaning mortality. We spent a little bit more on vaccine, given that 3-day shot. So there was some pigs that got euthanized after that, but it didn't seem to, the vaccine itself did not seem to affect the pigs.
If we could wait till we have the mic, I'm sorry. If you could grab the mic for questions.
On your
Yeah, it was on.
Oh, okay. On your PRRS vaccine removal, did you move that or completely remove it?
So we completely removed it. We did go through and test nurseries and finishers and felt like our lateral PRRS introductions were low enough that we were comfortable with that. When we've gone back in and had to implement some PRRS vaccination, we've done it on arrival in the finisher.
Could you expand a little bit on the ear clipping for ear necrosis? What was the incidence before, after? How many batches do you have?
Mm-hmm. So we saw the ear necrosis really pick up around January, February. I think it had to do with flu season, but it was systemic. It was almost every nursery placed. So we were seeing around 80 to 90% prevalence in the nurseries, and the percent of severe cases was probably 10 to 15%, where a fourth to half of the ear was gone. So went in and just did the whole system. Started ear clipping, go in and take a 1/2 inch off of the ear at birth. And since we did it all at one time, we saw the effects all at one time, but it did go away. So we talked about, do we want to do this seasonally? And at least for us, trying to implement something seasonally, take it away, put it back in, farms start to complain. So we've just left it in year round. When we do a PRRS closure, we will stop ear tipping, just so we're not spreading PRRS around with the scissors. And have noticed with the closures, we also end up having some flu stability, and we don't see the ear necrosis return, but it has been intermittent in those flows when we've stopped clipping.
All right, let's give Christine a big round of applause. And again, at the end, we'll have some time for some